It's my understanding the defendant has an additional record she wishes to make.
Just related to the parameters and the discussion about the special limiting instruction. The idea of this being general intent, I mean, there's case law out there that says, generally speaking, child endangerment is a general intent crime, but the application of it specifically to 726.61b, I'm finding wanting. And there's a characteristic difference between B versus all the other forms of child endangerment. Obviously, the other forms, I would agree, were general intent crimes, but this one, that number one, is identified by the legislature as the specific form that qualifies for the felony murder rule, and number two is identified just recently by the legislature as the one that requires special punishment. It says an intentional act or series of acts. Again, instead of knowingly or willfully, it says the intentional act of torture, the intentional act of cruelty. I believe there's a better argument that this may well dovetail into the specific intent arena. That doesn't change the testimony of Dr. O'Hara and what we said before, Your Honor. But I do think that the idea of arguing that it's not intentional and that the idea that this specific form of child endangerment may well qualify as specific intent exists.
Your statement that this isn't going to change Dr. O'Hara's testimony, so this argument is more going to go to whether I'm going to instruct on specific intent.
Right, in the parameters of argument, Your Honor. So I just wanted to make sure we talked about that now, given the discussion that we had.
All right. Any further record you wish to make on that, Ms. Timmons?
No, assuming we'll be able to argue this later.
We will definitely argue it later. Ready for the jury?
We are, Your Honor.
All right, please go get the jury. Be seated. And good morning. I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend, even though the football game was boring. I hope you still enjoyed the weekend. I have spoken with the attorneys. Defendant has 3 witnesses they'll be calling. The state may have a rebuttal, but it does sound like they have every intention of getting all of the evidence submitted today, which will mean we'll work on jury instructions this afternoon outside of your presence and be able to do closing arguments first thing in the morning and have the case submitted to you before noon tomorrow. So just to keep you an idea of where we're going to be, you should have the case for deliberation tomorrow. Okay? Is the defendant ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Michael O'Hara.
Dr. Raise your right hand. Promise testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Have a seat. Mr. Hawbaker.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, Dr. O'Hara, you might need to be a little closer to the mic if possible. Can you state your name, please?
Yes, my name is Michael William O'Hara.
And can you give us a brief outline of your education?
Yes. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Memphis in 1974, and then I received my PhD in clinical psychology in 1980 from the University of Pittsburgh.
And how about professionally? Can you give us an outline of your professional experience?
Yes. So I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Iowa. I have been a faculty member at the University of Iowa in the Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences since 1980, so about 39 years. My area of expertise is the mental health of women during pregnancy and the postpartum period. That's work that I've been doing since really 1979, 1980, and I continue that today. So that work includes trying to understand the causes of depression during pregnancy and the postpartum period. It includes understanding how common it is. It includes methods for treating women with mental health problems during pregnancy and the postpartum period.
And did you prepare a curriculum vitae for today that kind of outlines all of your educational and professional history?
I did, yes.
And did you provide that to us?
I did, yes.
Is that an accurate reflection of a fairly lengthy history in the field?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Your Honor, we'd move for the admittance of Defendant's Exhibit A.
Any objection? A is admitted.
There's a brief reference to it in that document, but you're also a veteran, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what branch did you serve in?
The Navy.
Okay. Did you provide counseling services while you were in the Navy?
Yes. Back in the early 1970s, when we were experiencing a lot of problems with sailors and other service persons coming back from the Philippines and Vietnam with substance abuse problems, the military established counseling centers around the U.S. and overseas bases. I was selected to be trained as a substance abuse counselor during that time, and did that for about the last year and a half that I was serving in the Navy.
And I'm guessing, given your field, it is not uncommon to come across people with both mental health disorders and substance abuse issues.
That's right. It's in fact, it's very common. There's a term for that is called comorbidity, and it basically means when two disorders, mental health disorders, or a mental health disorder and a substance abuse disorder occur roughly at the same time. And sometimes the direction of cause goes in one direction, or sometimes it goes in the other. So sometimes a mental health problem can lead to substance abuse problems, and sometimes substance abuse problems can lead to other mental health problems.
Does the term self-medicate mean something to you?
Self-medicate is, I would say, a layperson's term, and it basically means using substances that may be legal or illegal to manage distress and other aspects of mental illness. So we often talk about alcohol as being self-medication for depression, or certainly other kinds of substances. So it's commonly understood that way.
Right. Now, obviously, we contacted you to employ your services, fair?
That's correct.
Is providing testimony in a setting like this, is that something that's a normal part of your job?
No, it is not. The normal part of my job is to really teach our undergraduate and graduate students, to supervise our clinical psychology students in our training clinic, and to do research. This kind of activity is very, very uncommon and infrequent in my career.
You supervise the clinic. Does that mean that you have, I guess what I would say, as opposed to the academic work that you do, but you also have sort of the real-world application of what you do? Is that right?
That's right. So we have a clinic in the Department of Psychology at the University of Iowa. This is where we train clinical psychology graduate students who go on then to practice, many of them in the state of Iowa. One of my responsibilities since I joined the faculty is to oversee their clinical work, to observe it, to comment on it, and to help them become proficient as clinicians. So that's a big part of my teaching. It's a teaching responsibility, but yes, that's what I do.
I was reminded I should have followed up about the amount. How many times have you testified in a court setting such as this?
As a professional psychologist, twice.
Okay. So it's not unusual for people in your field to pursue income by offering themselves as experts. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair to say. There's an entire branch of psychology called forensic psychology, where that's really a lot of what these people do.
Okay. But you're not one of those people, you're not a hired gun in that regard?
No.
All right, let me ask you this. What's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Well, a psychologist is an individual who has received graduate level training in psychology, and if we're speaking specifically of clinical psychology, that would include generally at least 5 or 6 years of academic training, along with practical training in our clinic, as well as practicum placements. So, for example, in our setting, we would have graduate students seeing patients in the hospital, in the Department of Psychiatry, in the Department of Neurology, at the Veterans Administration Hospital, in other settings. So they're trained to both be a researcher on mental health as well as develop professional skills. And when they finish with our on-site training academically and clinically, then they'll do a year of supervised clinical internship. Usually it's at a medical center or a VA hospital. And then after that, they usually need to do 1 year of supervised postdoctoral training before they can become licensed to practice. A psychiatrist is a physician, a medical doctor, who has gone through medical school and then has done a residency in psychiatry. Typically they're 4 years, and then after that he or she is eligible for board certification. Probably in terms of professional practice, a major difference is that psychiatrists are, since they're physicians, they can prescribe and manage medications. Clinical psychologists generally do not do that.
When it comes to diagnosing somebody with a mental illness, does it really matter whether it's a psychologist or a psychiatrist?
Usually not. The standards that we use and the guidelines that drive our diagnoses are essentially the same. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of 5th edition is the current guide for psychiatric diagnosis. We train our students to approach diagnosis in that way. We have other sorts of training as well, but in terms of diagnosis, I would say there's very, very little difference.
All right, you performed an evaluation of Ms. Harris in this case.
That's right.
Did you meet with her in person?
I did.
Okay. And how long did you spend with her?
Approximately 2.5 hours.
And what was the purpose of that evaluation?
Well, I was asked to evaluate her to provide some idea of her mental state at the time of the offense, that around the time that her son died.
And I believe in your report you focused essentially on the month prior to the realization that Sterling had passed. Is that fair?
Yes, that is fair. However, it was important to me to provide some context for that month. So I did a pretty in-depth discussion with her about her personal history to try to understand how that month came to be.
And as part of that evaluation and the obtaining the personal history, did you also interview others to verify what was explained to you?
Yes, I did interview Ms. Harris's mother. I did that on the telephone. We spent about 30 minutes. Beyond that, I examined a variety of records that were made available to me, interviews, depositions, hospital records, and evaluations by others. I looked at a good bit of information that bore on Ms. Harris's mental condition at the time when the baby died.
So you had a lot of other information available to you besides that lengthy interview with Ms. Harris, correct?
That's right.
other testing, other information from other people, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Did you perform any specific tests on Ms. Harris?
I gave her two brief questionnaires that address level of depressive symptoms and level of anxiety symptoms. I wanted to have a good idea of her mental state at the time I actually did the interview with her. So I used a measure called the Beck Depression Inventory, which is a very commonly used measure of depression. It's filled out by the individual, and a Beck Anxiety Inventory. The results were that she showed what I would call moderate levels of depressive and anxious symptoms, particularly on the depression side. Many of those, when I examined the individual items, reflected the fact that she was incarcerated, so they were not terribly surprising. But it was my judgment that she was able to to participate fully in this evaluation, so I didn't have any reservations about continuing on.
And that's the purpose for that testing, is to make sure that you'll have an effective interview with Ms. Harris.
That's correct.
Based upon that interview with Ms. Harris, based upon the information that you had at your hand, the additional testing, interviews of others, medical records, those sorts of things, did you eventually arrive at a diagnosis or diagnoses for Ms. Harris?
Yes. So there were really three diagnoses that seemed to capture her mental condition. One was major depression at a severe level, recurrent with what we call peripartum onset, which simply means an episode that begins during pregnancy or early in the postpartum period. Second diagnosis was post-traumatic stress disorder, or what's often called PTSD. And the third diagnosis was essentially substance abuse, severe, with stimulant medication, methamphetamine in particular.
Now, let's talk about those a little bit out of order. Can you describe generally what post-traumatic stress disorder is?
Post-traumatic stress disorder is a disorder that we've recognized now for quite a long time. It is usually thought to begin with some sort of a traumatic experience. The prototypical, or the most common ones, would be, for example, if we're working with veterans, it'd be some sort of a military combat, seeing a friend die, for example. For women, a very common trauma would be sexual assault, sexual violence, chronic sexual abuse. These events are usually very dramatic, at least as far as the person is concerned, and then lead to or are associated with a number of other, what we thoughts come in, thinking about it and being very upset about it. Often it would include getting very upset and aroused by anything that seemed similar to it. So being in a similar circumstance, or just being around people who were like a perpetrator in the case of a sexual assault. These things can be very, very distressing and upsetting. And then we see other symptoms that are things like problems with sleeping, being very anxious and irritable, and having very impaired interpersonal relationships. So, this can go on, if it's not treated, for years and years and years. So it's a very serious disorder, and we're seeing more and more of it. But I would say certainly sexual assault would be one of the prime causes or traumas associated with PTSD.
Now, in your report, there's a number besides that diagnosis, 309.81. What's that a reference to?
So the numbers associated with each of those diagnoses are the numbers that you would find in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's just simply a way of recording for purposes of keeping records what the diagnosis is. So that would be something found in a chart, and it would immediately tell someone who knew the manual what it was.
And that's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is one of those standard pieces of literature that would be used by psychologists and psychiatrists alike, correct?
That's right. It's basically the manual we use in the United States for mental illness.
And how did you reach that diagnosis with Ms. Harris?
Well, so the PTSD, she reported to me during the interview that she had a lengthy history of being sexually abused by her father. This went on for a couple of years, and it was, she was unable to sort of escape. She was afraid. So that was the kind of the signal trauma of that she relayed to me, and others in the past, I will say. The other symptoms that were present were many of the ones that I had mentioned about PTSD. So she showed this flashback. She, for a long time in her youth, she was avoided being around older men. She had intrusive thoughts about the sexual assault, and generally showed other symptoms that are commonly associated with PTSD. So it was a pretty classic presentation.
And those symptoms and those issues that she relayed to you, were you able to corroborate some of that with the other people that you spoke with?
Well, there was not a lot of evidence in the record of this sexual assault. It was noted in 2 other evaluations, one done by another psychologist sometime earlier, and then one done by a behavioral health group who did an evaluation with Ms. Harris prior to her arrest in October of 2017.
The symptoms that you described generally about post-traumatic stress disorder, it appeared to you that Ms. Harris was also showing some of those symptoms as well, specifically, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, let's talk about the second diagnosis of stimulant use disorder. I think you described it as substance abuse, but can you flesh out that definition a little bit better, maybe as it relates to addiction or why people use?
Well, Ms. Harris reported a long period of time where she was using methamphetamine on a daily basis and sometimes multiple times a day. And so use of that sort, particularly given its frequency and the clear problems associated with using it and her difficulty in stopping, led me to make that diagnosis. So, for example, she was using it while she was pregnant. Normally, one would be mindful of how you treat your body when you're pregnant. She was using it. So that would be an example where she was just unable to abstain from it. It interfered with her ability to take care of her children. It interfered in her relationships with other people. It generally caused her a great deal of personal harm and harm to others.
Without getting into the specific detail of it, given the reports that you had, the medical records that you had, were you able to corroborate Ms. Harris's methamphetamine use?
Well, probably the most telling piece of evidence that I found in the medical record was the fact that...
Dr. O'Hara, without talking about the specifics, were you able to corroborate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Okay.
So you explained some of it, that the methamphetamine use can affect your ability to take care of your children. How does it do that? What happens?
Well, in the case of chronic methamphetamine use, what we know from the literature, that is the scientific research that's been done, is that it has a number of what we would call cognitive effects. And so some examples of the cognitive effects that would impact on anybody's ability to fulfill normal responsibilities of being a parent or really anything else would include problems in attention, so being able to focus on a task, for example. It includes being able to manage one's emotions. So, for example, when we have a problem and we get angry, let's say we're at work, we have a coworker who is giving us a difficult time, we start to feel angry. Most of us, if we are managing our emotions appropriately, are able to think to ourselves, okay, I'm not going to lash out because I know that's going to cause problems for me. So we call that emotion regulation. That's disturbed in methamphetamine or stimulant abuse. We also see difficulties in initiating and maintaining a focus on tasks. Being very easily interrupted in, let's say, trying to make breakfast, where we have to make a series of small decisions, and if our ability to initiate and sustain on a task is impaired, then some of those even simple tasks become disruptive, and we are unable to, or we don't function very well. Another problem is monitoring our own behavior. So it's very important to monitor our behavior in order to get through life relatively satisfactorily. So, for example, if we're trying to take care of a child and we're not really paying attention to what we're doing to take care of the child, a lot of the important things that we might want to do get lost. Another cognitive problem in chronic methamphetamine abuse is impulsivity. So doing things that are unwise, that are done on the spur of the moment without thinking through them, is something we also see. So what we see then is a constellation of problems in our ability to use normal cognition, or something that we call executive function, to execute in our lives. All of these things are disrupted with chronic methamphetamine or stimulant abuse.
Well, let's move on to the first diagnosis, the major depressive disorder. Can you explain what major depressive disorder is?
Well, major depressive disorder is a mood disorder, and it's characterized by the presence of low mood, usually feeling very depressed, or that sense of lack of pleasure in things that are normally enjoyable. So probably all of us have either experienced it or know people who have, who go from being living their lives normally to all of a sudden not being interested in anything, withdrawing from other people. And so a major depressive disorder usually has to be characterized either by prominent low mood or prominent loss of interest or pleasure, and then a number of other symptoms that would include things like feelings of very negative self-worth, or feeling guilty about things that the person wasn't responsible for, feeling like life is not worth living, maybe feeling suicidal, being slowed down or agitated, so it can go either way, difficulty concentrating, thinking, making decisions, disturbances in appetite. These are all symptoms of depression, and when you put them together for many people, particularly if they're at a severe level, it can result in a very impaired functioning, failing to fulfill normal daily responsibilities.
And how did you reach that diagnosis in Ms. Harris's case?
Well, in the case of Ms. Harris, she had had a long history of depression based on our interviews, starting probably around the time that she began to suffer this sexual abuse that she had reported. And it sort of cycled on and off for many years. And for various episodes, it was very clear from her report that she had most, or if not all, of the symptoms of depression, including making very serious plans to kill herself at one point. So it was a pretty easy diagnosis to make. It was also corroborated, at least on one occasion, in the medical record.
Not the first time that diagnosis has been applied to her.
That's correct.
Now, let me ask you, what is the significance then of, we have major depressive disorder and then recurrent?
So recurrent simply refers to the fact that the diagnosis isn't the first time it's occurred, that we would have seen similar episodes in the past. So one of the things that we understand about depression is that these episodes for many people come and go, sometimes at a very severe level, other times not so severe. Sometimes there's complete recovery from a depressive episode, but many individuals experience repeated episodes throughout their lifetime.
And then the modifier severe in your diagnosis?
Well, that's sort of a judgment call based on how significant the symptoms are as well as the level of impairment. And it was my judgment that in the totality, certainly her worst depressions were at the severe level, and I would say at the time around the time after Sterling was born, a good bit of that was at a severe level.
And that brings us to the final part of it. It was with peripartum onset. Can you explain the significance of that?
Well, there's been a debate among psychologists and physicians who work with women about this concept of postpartum depression. So in the lay literature, let's say in the popular literature, there's been a lot of discussion about having a depressive episode that begins after delivery. We see lots of celebrities now will come out and talk about this. It's become notorious in a certain sense. However, one of the problems that we've had in the field is defining exactly when does it occur, how long can it last, can you have a postpartum depression that begins 6 months or a year after delivery? We know that a lot of these depressions actually, in fact, begin during pregnancy, in a few cases maybe even before that. So the American Psychiatric Association, which is the body of psychiatrists that put together the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, in the latest version of it basically said peripartum onset means that the episode began sometime during pregnancy or as late as about 4 weeks after delivery. Whether that actually defines a unique depression or not, we don't really know, but that's what it means.
Kind of gives you a starting point, is that right?
Right.
Okay. Now, that can give you a starting point. How long can depression last? Is there a timeline, or can it last for months? Or
These episodes can last for a very, very long period of time if a woman isn't treated appropriately with either psychotherapy or some sort of a medical therapy. There was a time when these kinds of severe depressions led to years-long hospitalization for women in state psychiatric institutions. But with modern treatments, we've been able to avoid doing that. But these women, particularly when they have severe depressions, certainly do need to be treated to shorten the length of the episode.
Now, let's say you have somebody that has multiple children, or has given birth twice. Is there a significance if the woman suffered from postpartum depression after the first child as it relates to any diagnosis after a second child?
When we're looking at factors that we think increase risk for postpartum depression, certainly having had one following the birth of an earlier child, that does increase the risk. It certainly is not a risk of absolute, but it is certainly a risk factor.
It actually might make postpartum depression more likely.
That's right. It does make it more likely. Yes.
Okay. And was that part of the diagnosis or something you took into account in this case?
Well, it certainly was relevant in understanding her situation, and it gave me a little bit more confidence that what we were talking about was major depression, that it had been recognized by a medical professional at some point in the not too distant past.
The depression, I know that you talked about some of the symptoms that occur when someone is severely depressed. I always think about it in terms of somebody that doesn't even want to crawl out of bed that day, that sort of thing. Can it impact a relationship or relationships that individual may have differently, say, between children or adults?
So, one of the major consequences of depression that we see for individuals who are in relationships, so this would be partners, this would be children, is that these relationships are often very impaired. That individuals who are very depressed often are very irritable, they're very difficult to get along with. The depressed individual is not going to be very attentive to the relationship, might be in a situation where he or she, in this case a she, would neglect household responsibilities and generally not function at a very high level, certainly requiring help and support. And one of the things that we often see when a woman is depressed in the postpartum period is others kind of rally around her to what we call support her or help her out given her evident difficulty. So in the absence of that kind of help, those problems can become very severe.
We've heard in this case, obviously we know of the death of Sterling, but we've also heard some evidence in this case that about Nala, the toddler. Is there a reason that if you're in this depressive state that Nala would do better or thrive versus Sterling?
Well, I mean, Nala was was almost 2 years old at this time, and a child of that age is mobile, is able to speak, express herself in Nala's case, and so I wouldn't say she's not going to fend for herself, but she can make her needs known to her parents. Sterling, on the other hand, as an infant, could cry, but there really wasn't much else that he could do. So it's not terribly surprising that Nala would not have been affected as much, but I would not argue that she was unaffected by all of this. There was an evaluation done of her, and it was pretty clear that there were significant problems that were identified by the social workers who did that evaluation. And I don't mean physical per se, but psychological.
And since I believe you testified earlier that one of the symptoms that can exist with depression is you lose the ability to find pleasure in things, and even pleasure in caring for your children or pleasure in your children, period. Because Nala was mobile, she was more able to at least grab the attention of Ms. Harris. Is that right?
That's right. And in fact, Ms. Harris communicated during the evaluation that she was very irritable with Nala, probably because Nala was making demands on her that for attention and probably for food too.
Backing up now to the three diagnoses, do they interplay? Is it significant that there are three? Do they magnify each other? Do they come and go at different times? What's the significance of the three together?
Yeah. Well, my understanding of the timeline of the mental health problems that Ms. Harris experienced was that the PTSD, the trauma experience with her father, started a chain of events probably that led to the PTSD, to depression when she was a youngster. There is also evidence in the record that she was using marijuana at one point. She was actually doing some cutting of her wrists. So she was, even in her youth, was showing quite a bit of disturbance. And as near as I can tell, it was when she met her partner, Mr. Koehn, that she began to use methamphetamine at his encouragement or insistence. The methamphetamine would have been, and the marijuana would have been both examples of using drugs to probably help manage distress, pain, if you will, and it became something that she could turn to alleviate some of her suffering. From the major depression, from the effects of the PTSD, and the miserable circumstances of her life. So all of those things together, yes.
Thank you, sir. I don't have any other questions.
Cross-examination.
Doctor, would you agree that someone suffering from a severe major depression, it's a global and systematic impairment?
I think that's fair to say.
That normally affects all aspects of their life?
Well, at a certain point, if it's severe enough, it will. But even severe depressions don't necessarily show impairment across every domain. But there are depressions that get so severe that a person essentially might take to bed and do nothing else. But most individuals with even severe depression are doing something, but usually in a very ineffective manner.
And generally, they have difficulty caring for themselves sometimes.
That's true.
They have difficulty caring for others sometimes.
Correct.
Difficulty communicating.
Yes.
Difficulty doing basic, simple things in life.
Yes.
sometimes like getting out of bed,
Yes.
bathing themselves,
Yes.
feeding themselves.
Sometimes, yes.
And a lot of those factors can also be symptoms of drug use too, correct?
Some of those, certainly.
Now, when you did this evaluation, you wanted an idea of the defendant's mental state during the month of August 2017, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and when did you meet with her?
I met with her on December 18th of last year.
So December 18th of 2018.
That's correct.
Right, now, is it fair to say that the majority of the information that you received and that you relied on for your opinion was regarding her depression, was her statements, what she told you?
The majority, yes.
So you had to take what she told you as true.
Well, there is always the possibility that someone will be untruthful with you when you're doing an evaluation. Given the story and its complexity, I judged it to be largely true, but it is the case that it was largely based on her report to me.
And you testified earlier that it's not a normal thing for you to do forensic evaluations of persons who are facing court proceedings.
That's correct.
Now, specifically, some of the facts, you've read the police reports and all those types of things, correct?
That's true.
Okay. So during the month of August, during the month of August, Ms. Harris was able to clean the house.
Are you asking me?
Yes. She actually talked to you about that, didn't she?
Yes. So, yes, she was able to clean the house.
She fed Nala.
Yes.
She bathed Nala.
I don't necessarily have a recollection of that. It's possible it's in the report, but I don't have a recollection of that.
There was a dog in the house that needed taken care of.
I will have to rely on your memory of all of the police reports. That's not in my report.
Did you look at any of the photographs of the home?
Yes.
Okay, so you were aware that there was toys and things for entertainment for Nala.
Yes.
She took the time during that month to take drugs, correct?
That's right.
You can see from the phone records that she talked frequently and consistently with Zach.
That is one element of the record I did not examine, so I can't really speak to that.
Okay. So if you were to know that she texted and spoke frequently with Zach, and that she texted and spoke frequently with her mother during that time frame in August, does that change your opinion at all?
Well, I would have to see the nature of the text, the amount. I just don't really know. I think it is important to note in this context that she was frequently using methamphetamine, which is a stimulant, so it doesn't surprise me that she was activated in doing some things. I would argue that she was not showing very good judgment a lot of the time, but the drug use certainly complicated an evaluation of how all of this affected her behavior.
So methamphetamine as a stimulant probably aided her in getting things done.
In some cases.
Were you aware, have you seen any of the Facebook records?
I'm sorry?
The Facebook records?
I did not see the Facebook records.
Okay. So when you made this evaluation, you weren't aware that she was posting fashion photos on Facebook?
No.
And you weren't aware that she was posting pictures of her dog on Facebook during August of 2017?
No.
All right, let's talk about some of the statements that she made to you during your interview. She told you during the interview that she was not allowed to text or call her mother, correct?
That's what she said.
In fact, your report states that there was no contact between the defendant and her mother from August 5th up until the time of Sterling's death, correct?
Yes.
And why did you write this in your report? How did you have that information?
Well, her mother said that that was the last time she had seen the two children.
The weekend of August 5th.
Yes. And I believe that Ms. Harris had commented that she was restricted from having contact with her family.
In fact, she told you that she wasn't allowed to talk to anyone. Is that right?
Other than Zachary Koehn's family members, cousins.
And you didn't take the time to look at the phone records to see if that was correct or not?
I don't think it's fair to say I didn't take the time. If I had been, the material made available to me was quite voluminous and not very well characterized, so I didn't really realize that that information was there.
Well, would it change your opinion at all if you knew that she did have numerous texts and phone calls with her mother during that time frame, despite her telling you that she didn't?
Well, I think if knowing something about those contacts would be informative, but without any more information than that, it would be just difficult for me to say.
Okay, so she was making plans with her mother to watch the kids the weekend of Sterling's death.
Yes, that I do know.
Okay. If she was talking to her mom about how they found some mattresses cheap and they wanted to sell some of them for money, what does that tell you?
Well, that she was interested in getting a mattress.
What about if she was asking her mom about insurance and what's the best insurance to get?
Yeah.
Now, you talked about how she had this postpartum with Nala. Was that based on what she told you?
It was based on the Cresco Hospital records and the diagnosis of postpartum depression and the prescription for antidepressant medication.
Okay. Now, did she also tell you that the doctor prescribed that as a preventative medication and that she took it for a week and didn't continue taking it?
Well, she said that it made her feel sick, so she stopped.
And you're aware from the facts of the case that Nala survived infancy and she was a happy, healthy girl at almost 2 years?
Well, she certainly survived. Whether she was happy, I think, given the evaluations done of her after Sterling's death, one might question that.
Now, in your discussions with the defendant, you would agree that she was fairly emotionally dependent on Zach, correct?
Correct.
She expressed love for Zach, at least during that time of August 2017.
That was my understanding, yes.
She worried a lot that Zach was having an affair.
That's correct.
She wanted Zach to be home more.
Yes.
And she was very assertive with Zach that he needed to be home more. Is that right?
I don't know that she was assertive, but she clearly wanted that.
And again, you didn't read the texting and the phone records, correct?
That's correct.
Zach's opinion and what Zach thought of her was important to Cheyenne, wasn't it?
Yes.
She was fully aware during August of 2017 that Zach did not believe that Sterling was his child.
That's correct.
She was fully aware that Zach loved Nala.
I'm sorry?
She was fully aware during August of 2017 that Zach loved Nala.
I don't know that I could substantiate that.
But she did let you know that even though Zach wouldn't have anything to do with Sterling, he would play with Nala and spend time with her.
Yes.
In fact, Zach would take care of Nala at times, just him and Nala, correct?
Correct.
And throughout her relationship, you saw through the records and talking to the defendant, she always chose Zach over her family.
Yes.
Her mother allowed the defendant to stay with her right before Sterling's birth, correct?
Yes.
And even prior to that, Cheyenne always had a place to go home to with her mother, isn't that right?
I don't know that I could say that for sure.
You saw, though, in her history how she bounced back and forth between
Yes.
her mom and Zach.
Yes.
But ultimately, she always went back with Zach, right?
Yes.
In fact, she left her mother's home to go stay in hotels with Zach, with the children.
Yes.
During your interview with the defendant, she admitted to you that she did not want anything to do with Sterling.
She said that. She was, I think, that disturbed, but yes, that was part of the interview.
You say that disturbed. It could be that's just how she felt, though, correct?
Well, that she would be feeling that way about her son, who on another occasion said how much she loved him, that level of impairment in her functioning would be, I would call that quite disturbed.
Her family life was not going good at that time, correct?
Correct.
She felt that Sterling was the cause of that.
I didn't come to that view.
She told you she did not want to change his diapers.
Yes, she did.
She told you that she was tired of hearing him cry.
Yes.
She told you that Nala got mad at her if she was with Sterling.
Correct.
In fact, she told you that Sterling was put in that back room so she didn't have to deal with Nala being upset with her, correct?
No.
And
That's
what
not
did
my
she tell you?
recollection.
What's your recollection?
That Sterling was in that room to deal with his temperature regulation and to have a place for him. Well, the swing was in the room.
So her explanation to you is that she put Sterling in the back room to regulate his temperature?
Well, she had talked to me about the need to keep him appropriately warm in the home. Or if that wasn't said to me, it was in her interview with the sheriff.
Did she tell you, when you spoke with her, did she tell you when she decided to put him in that back room? How long had he been back there?
I'm not sure I know.
Now, she did tell you that she would go into the room every day. Is that right?
I don't know that she said, I don't know that I asked her if she went into the room every day. One might assume that she did with the baby there, but I don't know that it was part of my interview.
Well, you had in your report that the defendant said she would go every day into Sterling's room and give him a bottle.
This is toward the end, yes, that's correct.
What do you mean towards the end?
Well, this was in the month of August, so it would have been the last several weeks of his life.
Okay, so during your interview, she told you that she went in that room and gave Sterling the bottle every day.
Yes.
And if that were true, she saw Sterling every day before his death then.
Probably.
Now, you will admit that if the defendant had this severe depression, that it's unusual that Nala was cared for.
I don't think that's fair to say. Zachary Koehn, the child's father, was involved, so, and again, I would argue that she was not well cared for.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Do you remember giving prior sworn testimony? Doctor, don't read this aloud, but if you just take a look at this page. starting at line 7 and reading down through line 13 to your actual answer.
Okay.
Does that refresh your memory on what you said previously?
I don't think it is inconsistent with what I'm saying now.
You were asked. Now, you also said it was unusual that she was caring for Nala, but not caring for Sterling. Why don't you just go ahead and read that full answer so we can be clear on that?
All right. Out loud.
Yes, please.
I said that we would expect problems with both children, and my comment was that Nala, being a 2-year-old, was old enough to start making demands on her mother, and Nala was much more in the presence of Cheyenne than Sterling. But yes.
But yes, it's unusual.
Unusual would mean, and you're right, I had said that before, but I think that's maybe an overstatement of what it really means. Nala had problems, and the evaluation of Nala was indicated that by the social workers. So,
but Nala's problems didn't include starving to death, correct?
No, that's correct, of course.
And when you answered that, you're talking about how Nala's old enough to put demands on her mother to get her attention, correct?
Correct.
And you
Correct.
You'd agree with me that the stench of dirty diapers is demanding?
I would agree.
And you'd agree with me that the reason Sterling wasn't in the defendant's presence was because the defendant placed him in the back room?
Well, Ms. Harris had the child in the back room. That is correct.
You know, we talked earlier about, or I asked you earlier about if you had looked at any of the Facebook records or phone records. If you had seen things in those records that showed frustration or anger that the defendant had towards Sterling, would that make a difference in your opinion?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me that a mother who had the kinds of problems that Ms. Harris had would show anger and frustration with her children, with her partner, with her family. That would not be surprising at all.
Right, so if the defendant sent an instant message to Zach on June 14th, 2017, after he had asked her to call him, and her response was, "I'll call after I'm done cleaning up our damn son," and then sent a picture of Sterling with a dirty diaper, would that surprise you?
Would it surprise me? I don't know that it would surprise me.
Does it change your opinion at all?
No.
Now, Dr. O'Hara, you've never had a forensic practice, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and you don't have any specialized training in forensic psychology.
That is correct.
In fact, it's been over 20 years since you've done a forensic evaluation of this type.
That is correct.
And you agree that this type of work is typically done by a psychiatrist.
Well, I said that to you once, but that was probably in the absence of actual knowledge. It may be, I actually would say I don't know, quite possibly, but I don't know.
But you'll agree with me that you said in prior sworn testimony.
I did, yes, I did.
That typically these things are done by psychiatrists.
Yes, that's correct.
No further questions.
Redirect.
Just briefly, any other confirmation of your diagnoses in your records that you received, correct?
That's correct.
And whether it's in preparation for a trial or you working at the clinic at the University of Iowa, you would go through the same process to do the diagnosis, correct?
That is correct.
The fact that ultimately you were asked to testify about it today doesn't change what you do or how you reach the aims that you do, correct?
That's correct. I've been involved in many, many psychological evaluations, correct?
Now, Ms. Timmons was asking you about what Miss Harris was telling you, about how she felt about Sterling, about not wanting to change diapers and that sort of thing. Do you remember that?
Yes.
In your report, however, she prefaced what she told you, didn't she?
Yes.
And did she tell you that now, being sober and looking back on it, I really messed up? I was really messed up.
Yes, that's what she said.
So at the time, that moment of clarity, when she's not high anymore, not having that severe depressive state, she's looking back at it and explaining to you, good grief, what had I done, correct?
That was my understanding.
And did she also tell you that through all that craziness, those crazy thoughts, that she thought her parents were just trying to take her kids away from her?
Yes, she did.
And she said kids, not kid, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Recross.
So she recognizes now what she did was wrong?
Yes.
Does she take responsibility for Sterling's death?
That didn't come up in the interview.
That's all I have.
Anything else?
Nothing further.
Can this witness be excused? Or do you wish him to remain around for the testimony of the state's expert?
There is potential for return.
Doctor, you, other than during the testimony of the state's proposed expert, you are still sequestered from the court. Okay. You do need to remain in Plymouth County. Just real quick, as I said on Friday, if it's okay, because we started late, we're going to kind of work through the lunch hour. As it turned out, as I kind of expected, the OWI case that was supposed to go to trial settled yesterday morning, so they didn't have a trial. We could have started at 9, but I couldn't get a hold of all of you and say, hey, get here at 9, so we just went ahead and started at 9. Do you need a recess?
Can we just take a short break, Judge?
We can.
Okay. Not doesn't have to be a very long one.
All right. We'll take about 10 minutes.
Rise for the jury.
I did not. Continue to heed the admonition.
The defense would call Deputy Chief Reed Halo.
So say you confused me when you said my next witness is Ms. Watt. And I'm like, I don't think we can do it that way.
I'm pretty sure there'd be an objection for your...
Deputy, you're still under oath from last week. Proceed.
Thank you. Sir, you testified previously in this case, is that correct?
I did.
And on August 30th, 2017, did you have the opportunity to meet with Ms. Harris when you first arrived on scene?
I did.
And at that time, were you equipped with a body camera?
I was.
So was that interaction you had with Ms. Harris captured on your body camera?
Yes, it was.
And have you been shown what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit B?
Yeah, I've seen the video. It's in its entirety.
So would that be a fair and accurate copy of your interaction with Ms. Harris?
Yes, it would be.
Your Honor, the defense would move to admit what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit B.
Any objection?
The first 2.5 minutes of Defendant's Exhibit B. No objection.
Have either A or B been uploaded, do you know?
No, Your Honor, I did.
Okay.
We'll do that for Your Honor.
Okay. But it's admitted.
At this time, would ask to publish that 2.5 minutes to the jury.
Any objection? No. Merle, would you take the lights down, please?
Where are they? Hey.
So, there you go. Go get your stuff. Blood coming out of its mouth.
Blood coming out of his mouth.
Cold. Stiff.
He's stiff. There's no way it's been since 11.
Okay.
So you're going to want to investigate this.
You just...
This is wet.
Yeah, let's not touch anything for now. Hi. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Hi. Hi. Can we step in here for a minute? Is that okay? So we have the baby and this one. Watch out! You're poking your mom. There we go. Okay. Do you have some identification, you guys? Can we just talk for a minute here? So, can you hold? Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm just shocked. I
Yeah,
work nights. I just woke up. She woke me up.
She woke you up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was asleep and I woke up nights.
Okay. I'm so sorry. Okay. All right, Cheyenne. And what's this one's name?
Nala.
Nola?
Nala. Nala.
Okay. And what's the baby's name?
Sterling.
Sterling?
Sterling.
Like Sterling Silver.
When was Sterling born?
He was born May 1st.
2016.
Okay. And Nala? When was Nala born?
She was born November 8th, 2015.
I have no further questions.
State have any questions? Lights back up, please. Can this witness be excused? You may step down. Defendant's next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would request to read the former sworn statement of Zachary Koehn.
Any objection from the state?
Since he is unavailable, Your Honor, the state has no objection.
All right. Mr. Koehn gave prior testimony while under oath that will now be read into the record pursuant to an agreement between the parties. Mr. Hawbaker, will you be reading the part of Mr. Koehn?
I will, Your Honor.
Ms. Watt will be doing the direct.
Yes, Your Honor, and Mr. Coleman, I believe the cross. Or Mr.
McAllister. See, I'm not the only one who does
Not the
that.
only one.
Could the court reporter be excused? Yes. Mr. McAllister?
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you explain what's happening? So this is what happened.
Mr. Koehn previously gave testimony while under oath. He's not available to testify in this trial, so the state or the defendant is going to read in that prior testimony.
So what are they going to do?
Then they will read the questions that were asked of him on cross-examination in the prior trial. And I'll give you a more clarifying instruction when I give you the jury instructions on this issue, okay?
So they're reenacting.
Pardon me?
Kind of reenacting then?
Yes.
For the record, you are Zachary Koehn,
Yes.
and you are Sterling Cohen's father.
Yes, I am.
Mr. Koehn, let's start with the obvious and pressing question. Did you intend to do anything that would result in Sterling's death?
I did not.
Did you want your son to die?
No.
Did you love Sterling?
I did.
Mr. Koehn, I'm going to come back to that, but first I need to get some other information. So let's talk about some background information. How old are you?
I am 29 years old.
What's your birth date?
10/6/89.
Where were you born at?
Merced, California, or Fresno, in that area.
Did you grow up in California?
For probably 2 years, 1 or 2 years. I can't remember. I was just a toddler at the time.
Where did you go after California?
To Iowa.
Where at in Iowa?
McIntyre area in northeast Iowa region.
Did you have a TV growing up?
I did not.
How about a radio?
No.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Wild Rose Christian School over by McIntyre. It's a private Mennonite school.
How far did you go in school?
8th grade.
Did you graduate from the 8th grade?
I did.
At the school that you went to, what kind of classes did they teach?
Basic academics like math, language, penmanship, science, and social studies, things like that.
When you say science, did they teach psychology at all?
No.
What about biology?
I don't recall that. No. It would have.
What about physiology?
No.
How old were you when you graduated from the 8th grade?
I was 14.
Did you have any more formal education past the 8th grade?
No, I did not.
Since you stopped going to school at the age of 14, what did you do?
I started working part-time for a slurry hauler, liquid hog manure, and then after that, I was probably 15 or 16, I started full-time.
Where were you living when you were 15 or 16?
15, I was living with my parents. 16, I moved out and I co-rented with a co-worker of mine.
Have you been outside of your parents' home since that time?
Yes.
Now, you were excommunicated from the Mennonite community. When did that happen?
When I was 16.
Why did that happen?
I was drinking and smoking.
Was that something you were supposed to be doing legally at 16 or 17?
No.
Let's stick with talking about some things that you're not supposed to do for a few minutes. Methamphetamine?
Yes, I did.
When did you start using methamphetamine?
Oh, it would have probably been off and on when I was 17 because we were working pretty long hours and moving slurry. We ran 24-hour shifts, and so I was introduced to it saying it worked better than no dose.
What is no dose?
It's a high-level caffeine pill.
And what do you use no dose for?
Staying awake.
Sir, when did you last use methamphetamine?
I'm sorry?
When did you last use methamphetamine?
It would have been a week or two prior to this incident.
So with that, I don't want to put words in your mouth at all, but that had been mid-August 2017, somewhere around in there?
Yeah.
From the time that you were 17, well, I should just clarify, how old were you in August of 2017?
I was 27 years old.
Did you use methamphetamine throughout that time, from the time you were 17 until you were 27?
Yes.
When you were using methamphetamine, how much did you use on average?
I would use about every 2 days, and it would be a gram or so.
Did you ever seek any professional help for using methamphetamine?
After the state got involved, I did.
And when was that the state got involved?
When Miss Schrader was involved, she pointed us to some classes at Prairie Ridge, and I took them.
What is Prairie Ridge?
It is a drug treatment center and rehabilitation.
Was that inpatient or outpatient?
Mine was outpatient.
How long were you in treatment?
I was still in treatment when I got arrested, which was on the 24th or 25th of October.
Of 2017?
Yes, I was still going to appointments.
You told Agent Turbot that you never did anything other than marijuana. Do you remember telling him that?
Yes.
Why did you tell him that?
I don't like to discuss drug use with police officers, obviously. I mean, I was frightened.
When you were living with Cheyenne, did she use methamphetamine?
Yes.
Were you aware that she was using?
Sometimes and sometimes not.
Did you sometimes give her methamphetamine?
I did.
How did that come about? What, were you like a drug dealer or?
No, there's times she would ask for it, and there's times she would talk about quitting, so I would hold off. And she would become tough to deal with if I didn't give it to her. And I don't know. I guess I was just persuaded by her to give her some. But yeah, that's how it worked.
You're not saying that anybody was forcing you to use methamphetamine, correct?
No.
To your knowledge, did she use during Sterling's life?
During his life?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you know that Cheyenne was using when she was pregnant with Sterling?
No, I did not.
To the best of your knowledge, when did you think that she started using methamphetamine again?
We had previously moved to Louisiana, and I was hauling oversized loads out there. And she came back approximately a month earlier, and then I took the train up later. So I'm assuming that's when that could have happened because she knew people back home in Iowa.
But you don't know for sure?
I do not know for sure, no.
I mentioned the test at the hospital. I want to follow up on some other information from the hospital. In your interview with Agent Turbot, you mentioned that baby blues were mentioned at the hospital. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And And I believe you also mentioned Lexapro.
Yes.
Do you know whether Cheyenne was taking Lexapro?
Can we take a break real quick?
We can.
I don't know that the jury needs to leave. I just need to check my transcript.
Okay.
Yep, page 20, line 5.
If you want to consult with Ms. Watt, that's fine.
There was a prescription bottle, but not to my knowledge if she was taking it or not.
If at any time Cheyenne had told you that she was feeling depressed after Sterling was born, what would you have done?
I would have tried to make an appointment for her to seek help for that.
Let's talk about your work for a bit. Where were you working when Sterling passed away?
Nugent Nuggets.
That's selling chickens, correct?
Yes.
How long had you been working there when Sterling died?
Since about May 15.
Did Mr. Nugent ever give you a corporate credit card?
Yes.
Why did he give you the card?
It was for fuel, but it was also a credit card. You could buy anything with it.
Did he say that you could buy anything with it?
No. It was for fuel and truck supplies like washer fluid, antifreeze, oil, stuff like that.
Did you ever charge anything on that credit card that you were not supposed to charge?
Quite a few things.
What did you charge on Mr. Nugent's credit card that you weren't supposed to?
The one receipt for Hy-Vee was actually one of the times. I let Cheyenne take the credit card and she went and got some groceries and other supplies. And there's times that I would be on the road, especially up in North St. Cloud, and I wouldn't get loaded that night, so I would have to stay the whole day and just stay up there the whole day. And then the next evening I would just load at another farm. And my truck has a day cab, so I would usually ask permission before getting a hotel or room up there.
I'm not terribly familiar with trucking, but can you explain what a day cab is?
A day cab is a semi with no sleeper. It's just 2 seats and a gear shift and a steering wheel.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you.
Oh. Okay. Oops.
I know you realize I need help, but
I'm more red than normal right now.
you're fine.
Mr. Koehn, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 91 that's previously been entered into evidence. That is a Hy-Vee receipt, correct?
Yes.
Was that the receipt you were referring to when you said the receipt?
Yes.
Thank you. I can go ahead and take that back. And again, how are the groceries that are shown on Exhibit 91 paid for?
By credit card.
At any time, did you ever buy any other supplies on the credit card?
Yes.
What did you buy?
Food and diapers as well.
When you made charges on the corporate credit card that you were not supposed to make for things other than fuel or oil, things like that, what happened with Mr. Nugent? How did he handle that?
The first time I was reprimanded, and the next 2 times I was threatened with termination of my job.
Did he ever deduct the amounts that you paid?
Yes.
Where did he deduct them from?
My paycheck.
When you were trucking, did you keep a log?
I did.
Did you ever use an app called Keep Truckin'?
I did.
What is that app?
It's a electronic log, basically, so when you start out, you type in on this pad where you start out at, and it automatically keeps the time instead of having to write down the time every time.
Where did you keep this app at?
On my tablet.
And when did you start using it?
It would have been the night before.
I'm sorry, the night before what?
The night before the 30th, I believe, because I only used it one time.
And you used this app in the course of your employment?
No, just the one night.
But that's what you used it for, was employment.
Yeah.
Did your log also carry over into August 30th?
Yes, it did.
Were you working in the morning hours of August 30th, 2017?
I was.
At Nugent's Nuggets, did you work with Greg Nightingale?
I did.
You heard Mr. Nightingale talking about putting some tires on some rims. Do you know what that's about?
Yes. My tires on my car were pretty bald, and I had asked him for some new tires, and I usually bring my car to Simply Essentials parking lot. And so he had brought them with him strapped on the back of his semi, because he took his semi to the plant and he threw them out. And I put 2 in the trunk and 2 in the back seat because 4 wouldn't fit in the trunk.
When was it that Mr. Nightingale brought you those tires?
It would have been the evening previous to that, to the 29th.
So it would have been around August 28th?
Yes.
Okay. Now we talked about some data that you were entering in. Did you have a cell phone at this time?
I did.
And what was the area code of that cell phone?
406.
Where is the 406 area code?
Billings, Montana.
If you were living in Iowa, working in Iowa, why did you have a Billings, Montana cell phone?
Because I used to haul cattle in Billings, Montana.
What time zone is Montana in?
Mountain Standard Time.
Generally, sir, when you worked for Nugent Nuggets, how many hours a week would you actually work?
It varied.
Give me a low end of the hours for the whole week.
Probably 70.
Would be on the low end?
Yeah.
And on the high end for a week, how many hours did you work?
Closer to 80.
Were all of those hours always listed in your logs?
No.
Why not?
The State Patrol would probably not appreciate that very much. It's illegal to go over your time allotted for driving.
So when you were working for Nugent Nuggets, what was your typical daily schedule like? What time would you leave home to go to work?
Usually an hour before my schedule, I would go to work to do my pre-trip and fill out backlogs and back trip sheets from nights before and stuff like that.
How far away was the workplace from where you lived?
About 15, 20 minutes.
And then after you filled out your logs, things like that, what did you do next?
Backed up to the trailers and hooked them up and made sure all the tires were full of air, checked the brakes, checked all the lights, make sure every light's on and working, and just a lot of different maintenance stuff.
Where would you drive to?
Pretty much anywhere in the tri-state area.
So when you say tri-state, which states are you talking about?
Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin.
On a typical, well, let me ask you this. What time of day did you work?
Third shift.
And to clarify, is that days or nights?
Nights.
How many hours would you work in a typical night?
Usually it depended on the distance of the farm to the plant. Sometimes it could be 5 hours. Sometimes it could, there's a couple times I would wait to load. And I waited for 8 hours one time in Arcadia, Wisconsin.
Do you know what a double load is?
I do.
Did you ever do any double loads?
I did quite a few, yes.
After a typical night of working, about what time would you get home?
Early morning, very early morning or late night.
Now, you told us that you started working at Nugent Nuggets on about May 15th. I don't think I asked you, is that 2017?
Yes.
Prior to around May 15 of 2017, were you employed?
No.
How long were you unemployed for?
I got back a couple days before my son's birth, and so I would say 20 days approximately that I was unemployed.
Where were you working at before Nugent Nuggets when you were working?
I was working in Louisiana for Pedro Express.
Why did you stop working there?
That one, I stopped working there because Cheyenne wanted to be in Iowa for the birth.
Before you were working in Louisiana, where were you working?
I was working for Free Tag. It's a trucking company.
Why did you stop working for that company?
He didn't pay.
So you were working but not getting paid?
Yes.
Let's shift and talk about your finances now. Did you always get paid that much?
No, because of the credit card charges they would deduct.
When you moved to Alta Vista, were you in debt?
Yes.
Where were you in debt to, and how much did you owe?
To the bank, I owe close to $10,000, and my previous landlord, I owed about $1,000 to. In Verizon, I had incurred probably $3,000 worth of debt with them. $1,200 in credit card debt. Family debt was about $3,000 as well.
So did you owe all of this when you started working at Nugent Nuggets?
I did.
We need to discuss Sterling now. Why don't you just tell us how Sterling was born?
He was born in a bathtub.
Where at?
At my friend Rick's house.
How is it that Sterling came to be born in the bathtub?
Cheyenne thought she had constipation, and she sat and hollered for me to come to the bathroom, and she's like, "He's coming." And so I immediately freaked out and closed the door and then stood outside the door for a little bit, and then I ran back in and I helped her get in the bathtub to do a water birth.
Has you had any training in giving birth at all?
No.
Now, you had two older children. Were you present when they were born?
Yes.
How did you know what to do?
I had previously watched a water birth at one time in my life.
At any time, did you call 911?
I did, after he was delivered and in her arms.
When were you expecting Sterling?
2 weeks later,
Was he a little bit early?
yes.
There was some question whether you were Sterling's father. Why would that even be a question?
My other 2 children were darker complected like me, so I would get asked by other people, because Sterling he was pretty fair complected and he had bright blue eyes, and they would just bring it up and ask, be curious.
What was your answer to this?
I would tell them, honestly, I don't know, but even if he wasn't mine, I was going to still treat him as my own no matter what.
Did you ever change any of Sterling's diapers?
I did not.
Why not?
I don't do well with diarrhea. I start to vomit, and I vomit, diarrhea, things like that. I physically can't. My stomach can't take it. I have a very, very weak stomach.
Had you ever changed any of Nala's diapers?
One wet one, but nothing with feces in it.
Was Cheyenne aware of this? Well, let me ask you this. Did you and Cheyenne ever discuss the fact that you had trouble changing diapers?
Yes.
When did you discuss it?
When she was pregnant with Nala.
How old was Cheyenne when Sterling was born?
19 or 20.
Do you know her date of birth?
2/17/97.
What's Nala's date of birth?
8/15, no, 8, I'm sorry, November, what November is? November 15, 2015.
What was your relationship like with Cheyenne at the time of Sterling's birth?
Wishy-washy, I guess. It was up and then it was down.
Were you always faithful to Cheyenne?
I was not, no.
Was she faithful to you?
No.
Did the fact that you and Miss Harris didn't have the greatest relationship impact your view towards Sterling in any way?
No, it did not.
Going back to the diaper issue, did you ever smell anything coming from Sterling's room or in Sterling's room?
I did. Earlier on, I went in there and I had noticed a smell, and as my weak stomach, I asked about it.
Did you ever remove any dirty diapers from the room?
I did. I removed a bag of them.
After you removed the bag of dirty diapers, let me ask, when did you move the bag of dirty diapers?
It would have been the late afternoon of the 28th.
Did you notice any smells after that?
Yes, when I went in to check on him when he had passed on.
Was the door to the room where Sterling was at normally open or was it normally closed?
It was normally open.
Did you put any wax air fresheners underneath Sterling's swing?
I did not.
Do you know how they got there?
I do.
How did they get there?
We had a green Scentsy pot in our room, and we had ran out of the cubes, and I had asked her to change up the scent a little bit. So she went to the closet where we had some storage items, and she had taken them out of the package right there and brought one cube over, and she just has a hard time putting things back where they belong.
Where was that? You called it a Scentsy warmer. Where was that located in your apartment?
It would have been in our bedroom.
Do you remember telling Agent Turbot that you had last fed Sterling about 2 weeks before he passed away?
I do.
Is that an accurate statement that you made?
Yes.
Why didn't you feed him during the last 2 weeks of his life or the last couple weeks of his life?
Usually that was when we started changing up our work schedule, so he would be asleep when I would get home from work.
At any time were you aware that he was not being fed adequately?
No.
I think you mentioned in your interview something about Sterling not bulking up. What did you mean by that?
He wasn't getting chubby like Nala was. She was a real chubby baby, and Sterling, he wasn't bulking up from that. And I heard that he was just stretching out, getting taller.
Well, when you say that you heard he was just stretching out, where did you hear that from?
From Cheyenne's mother.
Did you ever talk with Cheyenne about the fact that Sterling wasn't bulking up?
Yes.
Did she express any concerns to you about that?
No.
When you were talking with Agent Turbot, you mentioned something about a friend or a friend with a child who died of SIDS.
Yes.
Did you say in high school?
That was in Riceville.
During the last couple weeks of Sterling's life, or during the month of August, did you ever hold Sterling?
No.
Why not?
Usually he was sleeping, and other times I was not to disturb him, as he was a colicky baby, and they're just super hard to get to sleep.
When you say you were not to disturb him, what do you mean by that?
Like pick him up out of his swing. I could go in and look at him, but he was usually covered in blankets. You could see his little head peeking out.
Now, on the weekends, you were home some of the time, correct? You didn't work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Did you ever interact with Sterling? I'm talking during the month of August. Did you interact with Sterling at all on the weekends?
Yeah, in the earlier parts.
The last couple weeks of his life, did you interact with him on the weekends?
No, because of when he was sleeping. There was one day that I went in and he was reaching up like this, and I put my fingers in his hands and he grabbed them.
Why didn't you go in and play with Sterling over the weekend?
I was usually asleep because of usually the double loads and the hours that I worked, and plus the substance abuse. I was usually pretty tired.
Did Sterling ever come out of the room? And again, when I say ever, I'm talking during the month of August 2017. Did he ever come outside of that room?
Yes.
How did he get outside the room?
His mother would go in and shut the door and take him out of his swing, and I assume change and diaper him, and then she would put him in the car seat because usually we were going out to eat or something. She'd put him in his car seat and then bring him out in the living room where I would be with my daughter.
When he would come out in the car seat, was he covered in a blanket at all?
Yeah, from here down.
For the record, I believe you indicated about mid-chest.
Yeah, mid-chest down.
At any point during the last couple of weeks of Sterling's life, did you try to interact with him more than you've described?
Yes, there was a few times.
What happened when you tried to interact with Sterling?
Again, I was not to disturb him as he was sleeping usually. I mean, he slept a lot when I was awake. I slept when he was awake.
When you went into Sterling's room, well, let me ask this. Was there an overhead light in that room?
Yes.
Did you use the overhead light when you went in there?
No.
Why not?
Because the way he was laying, he would squint at the light, so we figured that was probably hurting his eyes. So we used a lamp in the closet. The closet door is open, so we just put a lamp in there on the deal to keep it off the ground, and that lit up the room, mildly. It wasn't directly in his eyes or anything like that.
So at any time in the month of August, do you recall turning on that overhead light in that room at all?
When he was out of the room.
Did you ever turn it on when he was in the room?
No.
When Sterling would come out of the bedroom in the car seat, did you ever notice any odor?
I did.
What did it smell like?
It was a weird smell. I mean, it almost smelled like vomit, and so I would, shy away a little bit from it.
Did you ever check what the source of the odor was?
I did. I asked about it.
Who did you ask?
His mother.
Did she say anything about changing diapers?
No, there was a different explanation.
What explanation did she give you?
The milk had spilled in the car seat, and that's what the sour smell was from it.
Mr. Koehn, I want you to walk us through the last couple days before Sterling died. You told Agent Turbot that you played with him the day before. What did you mean by that?
Just so that you don't get confused, my nights and days were offset. So when I meant yesterday, it was the 28th.
How did you interact with Sterling on that day?
That was when he reached his hand up, and I put my fingers in them and swung him around a little bit, like that in his swing chair.
Did you actually take him out of the chair?
I did not.
Did you notice any gnats or gnat-like bugs?
No.
Was the smell in the room on that day?
Yeah, that's when I took the diapers out.
On August 28th, 2 days before you called 911, what did you do during the daytime hours?
I got home probably 11 or so, and I slept from 11 to about 3 in the afternoon, and about late 2 o'clock hour. And then after that, I made some chicken nuggets for the girl, ex-girlfriend, and Nala. And then we watched a movie, Aladdin. And about that time, it was time for me to go because I wanted to be at the plant around 5:40.
So what time did you leave home on August 28th, roughly?
About 5:20.
p.m.?
Yes.
And how long did you work on the 28th? And when I say on the 28th, to be clear, I'm talking starting work on the 28th to the 29th. How long was your shift?
From 5 till, I'd say, midnight, I would think.
And so what time did you get home on the 29th?
On the 29th, let's see, it would have been the evening of the 28th that I left at 5, so I would have got home probably at 1 or 2 in the morning.
What did you do after you got home on the morning of the 29th of August?
Could you repeat that?
Yep. When you got home about 1 or 2 in the morning, what did you do?
I went to bed. I think I made some grilled cheese before. I'm not sure, though. It could have been the next night.
And do you recall what time you got up on August 29th?
Yeah, I stayed in bed pretty long, and then I had to be at work around the same time, so I had slept probably till 2 or 3 in the afternoon again.
On average, how many hours of sleep would you get during the day?
Oh, average about 4 or 5 hours.
On August 29, 2017, did you have any interaction with Sterling?
I'm sorry?
Did you have any interaction with Sterling on August 29, 2017?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
He was sleeping.
Now, we talked about what time you went to work on the 29th.
Uh-huh.
Just to be clear, what time did you go to work on the 29th?
Around 5:20.
And what time did you get home on the 30th?
On the 30th, about 3:34.
After you got home on the morning of the 30th, what did you do?
Oh, I played a game on my phone. It was Bejeweled, and I made a little bit of food because my daughter woke up and she was expressing to me that she was hungry, so I made a little something for her.
Did you hear Sterling at all in the morning hours of August 30th?
I did not.
About what time did you go to bed?
Around 6 a.m.
What time roughly did you wake up?
I was woken up at, I figured it was 11 or something, but that was from a different phone. It was around noon.
How were you woken up?
She came into the foot of the bed there, and I was sleeping, and she dropped to her knees and was crying hysterically and kept saying, "He's gone, he's gone."
When you say she, who is she?
Cheyenne.
And you said she was crying hysterically?
Yes.
How do you know that she was crying?
I assumed it was crying. She couldn't speak for a while. She was distraught. And yeah, I had to ask her quite a few times questions so she would actually answer that I could understand.
When she was crying and upset, did she tell you what happened?
She had said, "He's gone, he's gone." And then I asked, "Who's gone?" And she's like, "Sterling."
What happened after she said Sterling's gone?
I jumped out of bed and ran to the bedroom there and looked at him. And I noticed he wasn't moving, so I touched right here, and he was cold. And I looked and I seen some blood out of his mouth, or what looked to be blood.
When you say you touched right here, for the record, you touched your forehead?
Forehead, yes.
At that time, when you went into the room, did you turn on the overhead light?
I did.
At some point on the 30th, you called 911, correct?
Yes.
About how long after you woke up until you called 911?
It took a little bit to call because in Alta Vista, there's absolutely no service for Verizon phones, which we have. So I was going back and forth through the apartment trying to get a signal. And then when I couldn't find one in there, I went outside and was holding my phone up, trying to get a signal. Or her phone, I'm sorry. And then I finally got one after Miss Shriver had spoke to me. And then I went back inside and made the call.
Were you smoking outside?
I was.
And why were you outside again?
Trying to search for a signal.
And is that the incident that Miss Shriver said where she encountered you?
Yes.
After you found out Sterling had passed away, what were you feeling?
It was like someone punched me in the chest. I couldn't get air. I was in disbelief and shock. I would have called it shock. Maybe other people have different conceptions of shock, but it was just I was lost.
At any time did you cry?
I did, in private.
Why did you cry in private?
Because when people around you are emotional, I just want to be the one who's like calm and collected so they don't feel like I'm losing control as well.
At any time did you get, I believe you described Ms. Harris as hysterical. Did you get like that?
No.
At some point after you had been interviewed by the police and you understood that Sterling had passed away, well, let me ask you this. What did you think had happened to Sterling that morning?
I had thought it was SIDS because in my mind, there was no explanation for why he would have passed away.
Were you at any time during Sterling's life aware that that was the condition that he was in?
No.
If you knew that he was not being fed, what would you have done?
I would have fed him for sure.
If you knew that he was not being changed, what would you have done?
I would have parked a wastebasket beside me, and I would have changed him myself.
At any time, is there a reason that you didn't check to see whether he was being changed?
No. I had trusted her judgment. I mean, look at my daughter. She's very healthy, and so I trusted her.
Do you recall Ms. Harris making a statement about taking Nala and taking off?
Yes.
And let me clarify, this is after Sterling had passed away, right?
Yes, that's correct.
What was your response to that?
I was shocked. I looked at her and said, absolutely not, because for one, I want to find out what happened to my son. I said, two, that's going to make us as a couple look very guilty, and it would be a bad idea.
Now, Mr. Koehn, I want to come back to one of the first questions I asked you. Did you know that Sterling had not been changed for some time?
I did not, no.
Were you aware that he was dehydrated?
No, I was not.
Did you want to see Sterling in pain?
I'm sorry?
Did you want to see Sterling in pain?
Of course not, no.
Mr. Koehn, did you want your son to die?
I did not, no.
I don't have any further questions.
Mr. McAllister?
Thank you. So, Mr. Koehn, are you saying that Sterling's death is all the fault of Cheyenne Harris?
No.
You're saying that you have some responsibility?
If I would have known, yes, I do.
So you're saying that what you did wrong is you didn't know?
Yes,
You used methamphetamines, right?
that's correct.
But the only reason you did it is to stay awake to work, right?
Yes,
You gave Cheyenne Harris methamphetamines, right?
that's correct.
But the only reason you gave it to her is because she'd become difficult if you didn't, right?
That's correct.
You used your company's credit card without authorization, right?
Yes,
But the only reason you did it is to feed your family, right?
yes,
And you did that even though they told you you were going to be fired if you continued to do it, right?
correct.
But you only did it to feed your family.
And get hotel rooms, yes.
And you used that credit card to buy those items at Hy-Vee.
I didn't buy them personally, no.
You used that credit card.
Cheyenne did.
You gave it to her.
Yes,
Did you tell her what to buy?
I did not.
You lied on your logs, but you did it because you had to for your work, right?
Yes,
You lost your job, but every time you lost your job, it was somebody else's fault, right?
not always.
You lost one job because you didn't get paid, right?
Yes,
You lost another job because you moved to Iowa, right?
I quit that job.
You had some debt, credit card debt, right?
Yeah,
Was that your fault?
yes,
Was it Cheyenne? You didn't change diapers because you had a weak stomach, right?
that's correct.
And you couldn't handle the smell of feces, right?
Yes.
But you worked at a manure hauling company?
Human feces and animal feces are different in my nose.
Your nose is that refined?
Of course.
And the reason the house was a mess is because Cheyenne had a hard time putting away stuff, right?
Yes.
That was her fault, right?
If you say so. I don't think it...
Is that what you're saying?
No.
Sterling didn't go to the doctor, and that was Cheyenne's fault.
I said that she had an appointment made, but I wasn't sure if she had followed through with it or not.
It wasn't your responsibility to make sure Sterling had his well baby visit? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. It's because she took my daughter to all her doctor visits, so I trusted her.
Asleep.
Yes.
You didn't see Sterling in your apartment because Cheyenne told you not to disturb him, right?
Yes.
You didn't turn the light on in Sterling's room because you didn't want Sterling to squint,
Yes.
right?
That's correct.
So that's why you couldn't see in the room?
You could see a little bit. It was a mild light with the lamp.
You didn't interact with Sterling in the living room of the apartment because he had a bad smell, right?
No.
A sour smell, you described it. Isn't that what you said?
Yes, but we were headed out on a family deal, so there wasn't much time to interact.
The reason you didn't call 911 right away is because you didn't have a cell signal. Is that right?
That is correct.
How many doors did you go knock on asking for a cell phone or asking for help?
None.
Why didn't you ask Jennifer Shriver to call 911?
I didn't think of it.
Well, what were you thinking about?
I was just disbelief. I mean, it was a whole bunch of thoughts running around into one.
When you were interviewed by the police, you were emotionless and you didn't cry because you only do that in private, right?
I like to, yes.
And you described finding your dead son in the swing in the next room matter-of-factly, didn't you?
Yes.
No emotion?
I guess not.
Now, Mr. Koehn, to be clear, you're not claiming that you're only going through the 8th grade, that you only going through the 8th grade didn't give you the skills to care for a baby, are you?
No.
Somebody who has an 8th grade education knows that a baby needs a diaper change, right?
Yes.
Needs to be fed a bottle, right?
Yes.
You don't have to take a biology class for that, do you?
I guess not. Probably health class.
Well, you knew that, right?
Yeah, from observations from other people.
You don't have to grow up with a TV or a radio in your house to know that, do you?
Probably not.
And to be clear, there's nothing about you growing up in a Mennonite community that explains the death of Sterling, does it?
No.
In fact, you grew up in a stable home, right?
Yes,
And you had parents that cared for you.
that's correct.
They provided you with clean clothes,
Yes,
diapers when you needed them when you were an infant,
that is correct.
and they provided you a good example of how to be a father, didn't they?
Yes.
You're not claiming that you didn't know what it took to raise a child, did you?
No.
Now, you're also not claiming, are you, that you had the resources to provide for Sterling's care?
I'm sorry?
You're not claiming you didn't have enough money to provide for Sterling's care, are you?
No.
You made a good salary, right?
Decent, yes.
You ate every day, right?
Not every day.
Did you skip meals for some reason?
Yes.
Why?
Sometimes I didn't have money, or other times I didn't have time. I was working.
Did you skip meals to provide formula for your son?
A few times, yes.
When did you do that?
It would have been earlier August, late July.
Now, you saw the food that was bought on that receipt, correct?
I did not.
You didn't see it in your house?
Oh, yes, I meant, okay, yeah.
There was food in your house, right?
Yes, there was.
Can you explain how it was that you were well fed, Cheyenne was well fed, and Nala was well fed, and your son was dying of malnutrition in the back bedroom?
I cannot explain that, no.
You had no explanation,
I put my trust in the wrong person.
and that's what you did wrong?
I believe so, yes.
Let's talk about the dog for a second. Your dog was named Leo, right?
Yes,
Prior to 911 coming, you took Leo out of the house, didn't you?
I did.
Did you do that before or after you called 911?
It was after.
And your focus was on getting Leo out of your house.
Yes, because he was quite unfriendly.
And was Leo supposed to be in your house?
No.
Now, Leo is a dog, right?
Yes,
Did you care for Leo?
I did.
A dog has to be fed, right?
Yes.
Can't feed itself.
Nope.
A dog has to get water, right?
Yep.
Can't get water for itself.
Nope, he cannot.
Did you give that dog food?
Yes,
Did you give that dog water?
I did.
I assume you didn't want that dog using your apartment as a bathroom, right?
Correct.
You took the dog outside?
Yes.
Would you agree that you took better care of Leo than you did your own son?
The way it looks, yes.
How would you explain that?
I put my trust in the wrong person.
But you didn't trust her to take care of the dog?
Not all the time, no.
How would you explain that Nala was well taken care of?
I don't know.
Is it because you knew Nala was your child?
No.
Is it because you didn't think Sterling was your child?
No, that didn't have no matter to me.
So as I understand your testimony, the last you saw Sterling was on Monday, August the 28th.
Yes.
And you said he played with you. Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you went in that back bedroom,
Yes.
and you smelled a diaper smell,
Yes.
and you took the diapers out.
I did.
Did you go back in the room?
I did not.
How many diapers did you take out?
About 3 or 4.
Is that the first time in that apartment you smelled dirty diapers?
No.
Tell me about when you saw Sterling. What did he look like?
After?
No, when you went in on August 28th.
Oh. He looked to me to be alert and moving around. He was skinny though, but as far as I could tell from here on up, he was okay.
Because you said earlier that he was covered up to his neck with a blanket, right?
Uh-huh.
How was it you played with his finger?
He had them out.
So his arms were around the blanket?
Yes.
So you couldn't see any of his clothing, just his arms?
Yes.
Is that why you're saying you didn't know he was sitting in soaking wet clothing?
Yes.
I thought you had a weak stomach. You couldn't smell anything?
I did, and I took the diapers out, and I figured the smell was just lingering.
You're claiming that Sterling didn't look sick,
Yes.
and that's the last time you saw him.
Yes, until his death.
So, as I understand your testimony, you were surprised that Sterling had died, right?
Yes.
And so you went in that room and you checked at him, correct?
Yes.
And you touched his head,
I did.
You didn't grab him out of the chair.
No, because I could tell that he was already dead, because he was very pale and he wasn't moving at all and he was staring straight ahead.
And you didn't want to grab him to see if there was anything you could do?
Well, no.
You didn't want to hold him to your chest and see what's wrong with my baby?
I could tell he was already cold by touching him.
You didn't want to take him and run out and say, somebody help me, my child. That never crossed your mind?
No, it didn't.
Instead, you went outside trying to call 911,
Yes,
and you smoked a cigarette.
I did.
Now, you said that you lied to John Turbot. You weren't truthful with him about the drug use, right?
Yes,
And the reason you did that is because you didn't want to get in trouble, right?
yes,
So you were thinking about yourself and not your dead son. Isn't that true?
not necessarily.
Well, didn't you want to give him all the information to find out what had happened to your son?
I did.
You told him that Cheyenne wasn't using drugs. That wasn't true, right?
That's correct.
Wouldn't that help him get to the truth?
It would have.
Why didn't you tell him that?
I was scared.
You also claim that you stopped using drugs 2 weeks before Sterling's death, right?
Yes,
So as I understand your testimony, you said at one time you were sleeping a lot because you'd been using drugs, right? But you stopped using 2 weeks before, you said?
the come down lasts a lot longer than 2 weeks.
So for 2 weeks you were sleeping longer than you should because of the drug use?
Yes,
So as I understand your testimony, you used drugs for 10 years, methamphetamine.
yes.
Then the 2 weeks before your son's death, you quit cold turkey?
I didn't quit cold turkey. It was just a money issue.
Well, what do you mean you didn't quit cold turkey? Did you use again?
No, I mean, I didn't just say, okay, this is the end of it. It's the money was the end of it.
Now, you also told Special Agent Turbot, when you were interviewed that day, August 30th, that you heard Sterling cry at 6 o'clock in the morning. Do you remember saying that?
Yes,
And today you testified you didn't hear him.
yeah,
So why did you tell Special Agent Turbot that?
because I thought I had, but after that interview I spoke with the mother and I was told otherwise, so
Why did you think you had heard him?
I don't know, it was probably during my dreaming.
Sir, do you believe that Sterling laid in that diaper for over 9 days?
I would hope he didn't.
Is it your testimony that you didn't know that he had the same diaper on for at least 9, maybe 14 days?
Yes,
And it's your testimony that the door to that room was open,
sometimes yes, sometimes it was closed.
and your room was right next door a few feet away.
Yes,
How many times did you walk by Sterling's room in the last 2 weeks of his life?
quite a few.
You never went in to check on him?
Sometimes.
What did he look like?
He looked fine to me.
When did you check on him prior to August the 28th?
It would have been probably a week before, maybe a half a week before.
So you checked him on August 28th and maybe a week before that or half a week before.
Yes,
Are those the only 2 times you checked on him?
yeah. Because he would be crying and she was busy in the kitchen, so I'd go in there and, play with him a little bit and get him quieted down for her, and then she would bring a bottle.
And as I understand your testimony, Sterling, you called 911 on Wednesday at 12:55 p.m., correct?
Yes,
You were off that early Saturday morning until that Monday night from work, right?
yes,
And you were home that entire time?
no.
How long were you home?
Probably the one day.
Where were you the other days?
I was off doing other things.
What were you doing?
Trading drugs for supplies and stuff like that.
I thought you had given up drugs.
Well, I had leftovers, but I wasn't doing them because we were short on money and we needed an extra bottle and some baby clothes and stuff like that. So I had saved that for trading purposes only.
So the weekend prior to Sterling's death, you were off trading drugs for what?
Baby supplies.
Well, what did you get?
Oh, I got a couple bottles. There was a red bottle, and I got a bunch of little overalls for him. There was a couple baby blankets, a bunch of toys. There are older child's toys, but I figured he could use them when he grows up, stuff like that.
And so who did you get them from?
A friend in Twin Lakes, Minnesota.
So you drove to Twin Lakes, Minnesota with methamphetamine to trade for baby blanket, toys, and some bottles.
That would be correct.
That's your testimony.
Yes.
Now, in your apartment, you would agree that there were clean, unused diapers that were Sterling's, correct?
Yes.
You would agree that there were diaper wipes in the apartment, correct?
That is correct.
You would agree that there was clean clothing for Sterling in the apartment.
Yes.
You would agree that there was a can of formula that could be mixed up and put in the bottles that were in the apartment, correct?
Yeah, the sensitive stomach was almost empty, so for that formula, that's what I was usually going after because it was more expensive with money than it is with drugs.
You agree that there was clean clothing for Sterling?
Yes.
You agree that there was a clean blanket in that room for Sterling?
I believe so, yes.
So all that needed to be done was for you to use the supplies that were actually in the apartment to take care of Sterling, correct?
Yeah, that day. I was looking more into the long run, but that works too.
Would you agree that you failed Sterling as his father?
Yes,
Would you agree that you didn't provide him with the nourishment that he needed?
I would.
Would you agree that you didn't properly clothe him?
Yes.
That you didn't ensure he had clean diapers?
I would buy them, but I didn't diaper him or clothe him.
Do you think as a father you have any responsibility to make sure your child living in your house is well cared for?
Yes, I do.
And did you fail that responsibility?
I did.
What did you do wrong?
I should have stepped up, but I had my trust in the wrong person. If I would have known, I would have definitely stepped up.
It's your job to know, isn't it?
That is correct.
You told Special Agent Turbot that nothing looked out of place with Sterling when you were there, correct?
Uh-huh.
Do you stand by that testimony?
I do.
You told Special Agent Turbot that you talked to Cheyenne or Cheyenne was talked to in your presence about baby blues, correct?
Yes.
But she never told you she was depressed, right?
No.
You never noticed any signs of depression?
Not really. I'd call them more mood swings.
And if you had seen some signs, you would have stepped up, right?
Yes.
Now, sir, sometimes a father has to give up a child if they can't care for it, right?
Yes.
And you've done that yourself, haven't you?
Yes.
You gave up Caden.
Yes.
Sometimes a father has to do what's in the best interest of the child, right?
Yes, that's correct.
You knew that you could do that with Sterling.
I did, and I had mentioned it to her.
In fact, you called your brother and asked if he would take Sterling, right?
I did.
Why didn't you give Sterling to your brother?
She denied me that.
So it's her fault?
I wouldn't say that. She wasn't agreeing to it.
When you borrowed money from Mr. Nightingale, you told him it was for formula, right?
Yes.
It was for drugs, wasn't it?
No, it was not.
You didn't borrow $20 for drugs
No, I used my own money for that.
instead of providing for your child?
It was usually, when I asked him for that, we were out of money and I told him I'd pay him back. But usually I would buy formula before. All the time I'd buy it before I would get recreational drugs and things like that.
Nothing further?
Redirect.
Mr. Koehn, you said several times on cross-examination that you put your trust in the wrong person. Who was that person that you trusted?
Cheyenne Harris, the mother,
Where was she working at during Sterling's life?
she didn't have a job.
Outside of the home, she did not?
No.
You were asked about sleeping more after you stopped using methamphetamine. Why were you using the methamphetamine?
Stay awake and when I was driving truck.
And when you didn't use it, you slept more. Is that your testimony?
That's correct.
You were asked about obtaining methamphetamine. To your knowledge, did Cheyenne Harris ever get methamphetamine from anywhere other than you?
I had heard hearsay, but I wasn't sure if she had or not.
Do you know whether she ever used methamphetamine prior to meeting you?
No.
No, you don't know, or no, she didn't.
No, she didn't.
You were asked if you cared for Nala and did not provide for Sterling because he was not your son. Are you biologically related to Willis Koehn?
No.
How are you related to him?
Through adoption.
So you're not his biological son, are you?
No.
Is your mom your biological mother?
No, she is not.
Is Danny your biological brother?
No, he is not.
Do you have any other siblings?
I do.
Are any of them your biological siblings?
They are not.
Is everybody in your family adopted?
Yes.
I don't have any other questions, sir.
Recross.
No, sir.
You may step down. As with previous transcripts, the transcript that was just read will not be available for your review. Okay? And I'll explain that further. Further evidence from the defendant. You may. Feel free to stand. Be seated. Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Okay. The defense counsel want to confer with Ms. Harris, and we have some other things we need to do outside of your presence. So we are going to take about a 45 minute break. You can run out, grab a quick lunch, come back. The state may have one more witness, we'll see. But that will let us tie up a lot of loose ends so that when we're done with testimony, we can let you go for the day and work on jury instructions. So run out, grab a bite to eat. We'll see you at 2:15. Continue to heed the admonition during this recess. Thank you. It is my understanding that the defendant is now going to rest. Is that correct, Mr. Hawbaker? It is, Your Honor. Do you wish to make a record at this time on your client's decision to not testify?
Yes, Your Honor. I've spoken with Ms. Harris. We spoke this morning again, and then just now to confirm that it is her desire not to testify, and we will also be asking for the instruction related to that.
Ms. Harris, you've heard the statements of your attorney. Have you had an opportunity to discuss with both Mr. Hawbaker and Ms. Watt your right to testify on your own behalf? And have they answered all of your questions?
Yes.
And is it your decision not to testify?
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand that I will be instructing the jury that they cannot consider your decision to remain silent in deciding whether you're guilty or innocent. You understand that?
Yes.
And it is your decision made by yourself under consultation from counsel not to testify.
Yes, it is.
Do you need any additional time to talk to your attorneys?
No, sir.
We are taking about a 45-minute recess. If at any time during this break you change your mind or have consulted further with your attorneys, I want you to let me know, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Because your opportunity is still there if you change your mind during this recess.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hawbaker, I'll have you rest formally on the record, but I did not want to make this record until you had advised the court that you were resting your case. Any further record from the state?
Not on that issue, but on another issue. When the transcript was being read, it's been submitted as an exhibit. However, on page 74, which is the last page, there's a line, on line 3, it says who testified yesterday. Just for the record, Nicole did not read that line, and that line should have been crossed out, but I just want to make clear on the record that that was not read, although it may not be crossed out on the transcript.
My copy does not have it crossed out, but I also noted that she did not read that line and was happy she caught that. Anything else before we take our recess?
Not so much, Your Honor. No, thank you.
No.
All right. We'll go off the record. It is my understanding that the defendant is now going to rest. Is that correct, Mr. Hawbaker?
It is, Your Honor.
Do you wish to make a record at this time on your client's decision to not testify?
Yes, Your Honor. I've spoken with Ms. Harris. We spoke this morning again, and then just now to confirm that it is her desire not to testify, and we will also be asking for the instruction related to that.
Ms. Harris, you've heard the statements of your attorney. Have you had an opportunity to discuss with both Mr. Hawbaker and Ms. Watt your right to testify on your own behalf? And have they answered all of your questions?
Yes.
And is it your decision not to testify?
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand that I will be instructing the jury that they cannot consider your decision to remain silent in deciding whether you're guilty or innocent. You understand that?
Yes.
And it is your decision made by yourself under consultation from counsel not to testify.
Yes, it is.
Do you need any additional time to talk to your attorneys?
No, sir.
We are taking about a 45-minute recess. If at any time during this break you change your mind or have consulted further with your attorneys, I want you to let me know, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Because your opportunity is still there if you change your mind during this recess.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hawbaker, I'll have you rest formally on the record, but I did not want to make this record until you had advised the court that you were resting your case. Any further record from the state?
Not on that issue, but on another issue. When the transcript was being read, it's been submitted as an exhibit. However, on page 74, which is the last page, there's a line, on line 3, it says who testified yesterday. Just for the record, Nicole did not read that line, and that line should have been crossed out, but I just want to make clear on the record that that was not read, although it may not be crossed out on the transcript.
My copy does not have it crossed out, but I also noted that she did not read that line and was happy she caught that. Anything else before we take our recess?
Not so much, no, thank you.
No.
All right. We'll go off the record.